Well, welcome back once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast where I look at motorcycle news, some topical views, and some tips on riding generally. We've got a fairly packed show today. It's Wednesday, the 16th of November. We're deep into autumn now. It's actually quite a lovely day out here in northwest London at the moment. After some overnight rain, the sky has cleared and we have some lovely sunshine. We will be talking about how to keep the sunshine beautiful by looking at the new Euro 7 car emission limits, which have just been announced, and the fact that bikes will likely have to match those. Brembo are producing some new greener brake pads to tackle the problem of particulate emissions. A new fast charge technology has been shown to put 135-mile range into a bike in less than 10 minutes. The latest advice is available for bikers who are planning on taking bikes to the EU in the back of a van, or even as a sort of a scooter on the back of a camper. Motorcycle Live, the UK's premier motorcycle show, opens this weekend. Peugeot are to distribute BSAs in the UK, and I'll be talking about the ramifications of that particular move due to something that happened last week, which I covered in the previous show. I'll be asking what the point of a motorcycle with a 600-mile range is. Vmoto's Stash comes to the UK, and also one correction on the show a couple of episodes ago, 650 V twins from Suzuki are staying on sale for the time being. And then finally, today's discussion point, I'll be asking why it is that claims in the Scottish press and repeated by Brake of soaring bike deaths in Scotland don't actually add up. So settle yourselves down for the next 30 minutes or so as I run through these stories. Don't forget, the show goes out twice a week on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11. And if you do have any questions, any comments on anything I say, anything I talk about, do drop me a line. Always interested to hear feedback on the show. We have a couple of people looking in at the moment. Clive is looking in, and so is Kevin. Hello. Nice to see you both. We've got a few other people online as well who just haven't said hello. All right, on with the first item, and the first one is the tailpipe emissions. Now, unless you've been living a Robinson Crusoe existence on a desert island for the last few years, you probably know that right now, zero tailpipe emissions will be mandatory for new cars and motorcycles right across Europe and including the UK from 2035. The UK has actually said it could be earlier if things move in the right direction. But right now, the European Commission has actually announced the final round of cuts to ICE engine emissions before that ban comes into force. Now, these new Euro 7 regulations will be phased in from the 1st of July 2025, so not that long in the future. Now, at the moment, new motorcycles that are on sale have to meet the Euro 5 standard. That's closely aligned with the current Euro 6 standard for cars. Why they couldn't have got them in step, I don't quite know. I know motorcycle emission tests came in rather later than they did for cars, but they could have actually gone forward a couple of numbers and got them in step. It would have been a lot easier to deal with. Anyway, the motorcycle industry fully expects that power two-wheelers will have to align with the new regulations by moving forward. So that would bring us to a new motorcycle Euro 6 standard. But as yet, there's no date nor even an indication as to whether that will actually be the case. And there are certainly no firm proposals as to what the motorcycle standards would be. But having said that, as I said, they are expected to align. Now, as far as I can determine, though, motorcycle and car manufacturers are not happy with the new proposed levels. Now, they point out that ICE technology is due to be phased out just a decade after the new standards come in. They also point out that existing standards are already at an all-time low, And that with ICE sales already falling, there is a serious argument over whether the cash that is needed to update existing engines to meet the new regulations would in fact be better spent on working on developing zero emissions technology. Now, as it happens, I tend to agree. The big pollution problem from vehicles right now is not the sale of new ICE vehicles, which, whatever some of the greener groups might like to tell us, it's actually the existing pool of older and much dirtier vehicles. Now, that pool is progressively shrinking as those vehicles age and they drop out of use. But the move to cleaner vehicles, whether ICE or EV or hybrids or something in like fuel cells, if they ever become viable, that could be accelerated by scrappage schemes. So, how does this all affect us as the end user? Well, my guess is that bikes like the new Hondas and Suzuki twins that we've seen in the last couple of weeks will pass Euro 6. They've almost certainly been designed with the further ramp up of emission limits in mind. But the older machines like the SV650 I talked about recently, now I doubt they can be tweaked again, and I suspect their end of life will be the next round of emission regulations. Now, we're just over a decade before ICE engines are end of life for new bikes anyway. I think we're probably very close to the end of the line when it comes to newly designed Japanese ICE motorcycles, at least as far as Europe is concerned. I'm sure they'll try to patch some of their existing engines to emit lower levels of pollutants, but my guess is that we will be seeing ever shrinking catalogues with ranges based around restyles, what I termed the other day as new boots and panties, for just a few bikes. Now, we've already seen how Suzuki have used the 1000cc engine in a range of different machines. Honda have been at the forefront of this platform development with the NC 750 and the CB 500s, which are now available in a variety of different forms. And of course, the CB 500 engine in particular has also been syndicated, and it is used in a wide variety of machines built in China. Now, so what I've said is I fully expect the development of motorcycles to move to electronics. So things like electronically adjustable suspension is an obvious one for the sort of more top of the range models, but expect to see more rider aids like adaptive cruise control and so on. And frankly, if you want an entirely new bike that's unlike anything else on the market, I think you're probably going to be looking to the sort of the fill-in sales from places like India and China. That's my guess. I'd be interested to hear your views on how that will pan out. Now, one of the bigger changes in the Euro 7 rules is that it will restrict particulate emissions from brake pads and tyres. Now, whilst those actual limits haven't been fixed, it should be known by the end of 2024, which doesn't actually give manufacturers a great deal of time to work to those limits, does it? The way that tyres and pads are currently made will have to change. Now, back at the Milan show, something I doubt many riders would have spotted was that Brembo was showing off something described as a greener and more sustainable future with the company's new Green Ants pads. Now, let me show you a picture, which I have forgotten to pre-prepare. Just a moment while I get that up on screen. There we go. Should have a nice picture of some brake pads up on screen now. Right, okay, so what you're looking at there are the new pads from Brembo. They are called Green Ants, and if you hadn't got it already, it's a portmanteau word made up by combining green and performance. So gold star for the marketing department for coming up with that particular one. Meanwhile, I hope the R&D department did rather better. The friction materials have been formulated, it says, without the use of copper or nickel, and not without any antimony and asbestos either. And on top of that, Brembo are planning to eliminate the use of methane gas during production of their brake pads. I'm not sure what that's used for, whether it's a making burning for heat, for curing these pads or something, I don't know. But they expect to save approximately 176 tons of CO2 per year through their new manufacturing process. Now, the Green Ants pads will eventually replace Brembo's entire range of aftermarket pads, and they'll feature a wide range of compounds for all riding situations. They're said to be already sintered to carbon ceramic pads available and they are said to be ready to provide for the specific needs of every kind of motorcycle, including off-road, on-road, and the sort of light applications like scooters. Brembo claim that rigorous testing's been conducted on these pads, both on the bench and on the track, and that the pads show more stable performance across a variety of operating temperatures. And in use, the pads are also said to offer predictable and reliable performance as the brake temperature rises. Well, of course, that's good, because one thing that does happen as we brake is that the temperature goes up, and that's how brakes basically work. They convert the energy of motion into energy of heat. It's one reason, incidentally, that EVs with regenerative braking can be more efficient than ICEs. You're not totally wasting all that energy that you put into driving the vehicle up to speed by braking and getting rid of it again. The regenerative braking recharges the battery. Brembo also claim that the pads offer 10% higher average coefficient of friction, and that is probably a good thing, because what it would mean is that you would need less brake pressure to generate the same braking performance, and that could account for their second claim that the pads offer 15% less wear and improved longevity. However, if you are thinking of dashing out to be one of the first on the block with your new pads on your bike, it's not yet clear whether you'll be able to fit them as aftermarket options to the existing standard discs on your bike, or whether you will need to install the matching alloy disc upgrade. If I do find that one out, I will get back to you on that. Right, now don't forget, the show does go out every Wednesday and every Sunday, normally live. Very occasionally I do a recorded show, and even more rarely I miss one due to other commitments. But if you set your reminder for 11, you should find me online Wednesdays and Sundays. If you can't make a show live, don't forget you can always catch up with it over on my YouTube channel. They are all on Facebook, but they're much easier to find on my channel at Survival Skills UK over on YouTube. So do pop over there, catch some of the back issues if you've not already seen them. Now, the holy grail of electric vehicles is high speed, long range, and fast charging. Now, unfortunately, right now, those three goals are actually mutually exclusive. High speed empties batteries rapidly, and that obviously impacts on range. And fast charge tends to imply a small battery offering short range. Now, there are various prototypes. There have even been bikes that are said to be production ready that solve those issues, but right now we've not actually seen one on the road. So here's another technology in development that could make the speedy, recent, decent range EV motorcycle compatible with the short refueling stops of a conventional petrol engine motorcycle. Now, this is said to be the goal of the Innovate Corporation and Lightning Motorcycles in California, who have teamed up to equip Lightning's it's called a Strike Carbon e-motorcycle with Innovate's 24 kilowatt hour fast charged advanced lithium ion cells. Right, after that mouthful, let's have a look at the bike itself. And there it is. Actually quite an attractive looking machine, isn't it? I don't mind that at all for an electric motorcycle. Vaguely sort of I don't know, what does it look like? There's a bit of GSXR at the rear, maybe a bit of Kawasaki at the front, so ZXR or something. Anyway, point being that the cells on that are fitted to this Lightning are claimed to combine fast charging with high energy density and therefore long driving range. And they say the additional benefits include the batteries are efficient in low temperature environments. They are low cost, and they also claim that they are safety benefits. So in other words, they sound like they offer just about everything anybody could ever want from an EV battery. Now the prototype bike, which is presumably the one that we see in the photo here, is said to have covered over 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers of testing on the road. And while that's not a great deal, what it has been doing is charging up at public 350 kilowatt stations. Now, here's the good news. What they have found is that a charge time of less than 10 minutes can offer an additional 135 miles, 217 kilometers of range. Although I do note that no mention is made of how fast you could ride those 135 miles. If that's at highway speeds, that's a significant improvement on what we've seen before. If it's the sort of typical 28 mile per hour city cycle, then not so good. But stating that the charging time for similar electric production motorcycles is generally 1 to 4 hours, Robert A. Rango, who is the CEO of Innovate, he said, "This means that riders of electric motorcycles with Innovate technology can now ride all day alongside conventional motorcycles without being left waiting at the charger." Now, while it's still a little bit longer than it takes to fill the tank of one motorcycle with petrol, I'm always amazed at how long it takes a group to refuel at a stop as everyone mills around to have a chat with all their mates. You can quite easily be at a petrol station for half an hour. So if this bike can really get a decent, meaningful recharge in 10 minutes, it really could be a bit of a game changer. Anyway, if the prototype, of course, can be translated into something affordable for the road, that's always the question. But we could at least start to put to bed the argument that EVs take too long to recharge for use in long-range motorcycles. Okay, now, if you do want to be taking a bike over the channel at the moment, the National Motorcyclists Council, the NMC, has published some general advice for riders who wish to take their bikes over the EU border in a van, on a motorhome, or on a trailer. The advice provides information about procedures and paperwork which should be considered for border crossings. Now, why do we need this advice? Well, thanks to Brexit and the drive to take back control of our borders, we're now outside the EU's single community. And like anybody else bringing in vehicles from outside the EU, we have to provide the right documentation, which is laid out under various international treaties and regulations. And the problem revolves around the definition of a means of transport. If you are riding a motorcycle, fairly obviously it is a means of transport. And some customs authorities have been taking the, what I consider the not entirely unreasonable view, that a motorcycle stops being a means of transport if you're not actually riding it. So if you are transporting it over a border crossing in another vehicle, that's when the problems are occurring. Even if these vehicles are road registered, whether if it's sitting in the back of a van or on a trailer or even on the back of a camper, it becomes goods in transit. Now, the real problem is that EU member states have not applied the rules consistently. And there have even been reports of vehicles carrying bikes being treated differently at different entry ports into the same country. So the simple answer is to make sure that you do have on you the correct paperwork in case it is required. Motorcycles, cars, bicycles carried in vans, on campers, in lorries, or on trailers must be accompanied by an ATA carnet if you hope to cross the border without hassle. Now, the latest advice from the MNC covers exactly what you need to do to prepare those documents. And what they say is the advice relating to the ATA carnet should be followed in all cases. Now, the press release stresses that the NMC advice should not be regarded as legal guidance. So if you don't get through a border point having done all the right things, you can't fall back on suing the NMC or anything like that. And they also emphasize that though it's been developed in partnership with the UK government, it doesn't carry the status of official government guidance either. And finally, the press release also says that it may be the case that paperwork outlined in the advice won't actually be requested, but they point out that the situation on borders are subject to change. So it could be on your next trip, even if you got away with it first time round. Right, okay. Don't forget, if you do find the show useful, if you enjoy the content, you can pop over to my coffee page, and if you drop me a coffee over there, I'll be much appreciating that. All your little contributions do help me spend the time researching and delivering these shows for you. And generally finding out lots of interesting things about motorcycles. At least I hope they are interesting. Now, you may remember that this time last year, the resurrected BSA motorcycles unveiled their first new bike. Now, the modern ABS-equipped BSA Gold Star appeared. It had a 652 liquid-cooled dual overhead cam single-cylinder engine. It made a claimed 45 horsepower and 55 newton meters of torque. That's about 40 pounds-feet if you are an imperial measures person. The torque's pretty low. The bikes don't rev particularly high. Peak power's at 6,000 RPM, so it's a big sort of thumper. Test bikes went out to the press in the spring, and I read a few of them, and the machine got some generally favourable reviews. But then it seems delays occurred getting the bike to market. It was supposed to be available from the summer. I've not actually seen one on the road yet. Doesn't mean they're not in the shops, but it certainly means that they've not appeared in numbers. BSA, you may recall, is owned by the Classic Legends brand, which itself happens to be part of the giant Indian Mahindra and Mahindra group. And you may remember from the last show that Peugeot motorcycles are also owned by Mahindra. Now, although Peugeot motorcycles are French based, they have outlets across Europe, 3,000 mostly in Europe, so a few in Asia. And it's actually been announced that BSA will be using Peugeot as a distribution channel. Now, that's not entirely a surprise because Peugeot, of course, are owned by Mahindra. Now, Classic Legends CEO and BSA company director Ashish Joshi, he said in a statement, "This is the next exciting step for us to bring BSA bikes, a great British brand, to the rest of the world. Peugeot motorcycles share with us a long history of the love of two wheels, and their extensive European network provides the perfect route to get the new BSA Gold Star into the hands of customers." Now, I don't know how the deal that's just been done by Mahindra, which would offload control of Peugeot to a German private equity firm, Mutares SE and Company, will affect this. Mutares are set to take an 80% controlling stake in Peugeot motorcycles. And as I mentioned last show, the deal has been concluded, but it does depend on consultation with workers and antitrust authorities. And Mutares themselves have a history of buying companies which they believe can be turned around and improved and then offloading them. So I do wonder how this new plan to use Peugeot as a distribution network will pan out. Now, it was a year ago that BSA revealed the bike at Motorcycle Live. This year's show runs from this weekend, the 19th of November, to the 27th. Now, if you do want to trot along, advance tickets, I'm not sure if they're still available, probably not very much longer, if at all. They were priced at £22 for adults 19 or above, £1 for those under 18. A £2 booking fee applies per order. There's also a car parking, which you can order £10 if booked in advance. Otherwise, it's £16.95 on the day, so that's quite a saving. Children under 5 get free entry if accompanied by an adult, although I'm not quite sure why you'd want to bring a toddler to the bike show, unless you can't find a babysitter, I guess. If you're paying at the door, the price goes up to a fairly whopping, I think, £27 for adults, although it's still only £1 for 16 to 18-year-olds. Do make sure you have a card with you when you turn up, though, because the NEC is now apparently a cardless, cashless venue. Now, opening times are 10 till 5. Shuttle bus operates for an hour after the event closes, and the bike park itself closes at 6. So you will be seeing the BSA again for a second year. Norton are also bringing their bikes back to the show, and the recently announced TE1 electric prototype, which was revealed last year, should also be on show. So there you go. If you want to know more, website is motorcyclelive.co.uk. A fairly easy one to remember, but I will pop it up for you. Here it is. So do pop over there and have a look. Personally, I don't think I shall be trundling along up there this year. Now, if you want to see this particular machine, I'm not sure if it's actually going to be at the show or not. Now, this is the Rieju. It's spelled R-I-E-J-U, but it's pronounced Rieju. It's a Spanish brand. It's their middleweight adventure touring bike, the Aventura 500. It looks very similar to their existing Aventura 125, incidentally. Now, if it does turn out, you can marvel at the fact that it's been designed with twin fuel tanks. There's one conventionally in front of the rider, but there is a second tank at the rear under the seat. And it is said that the bike carries no less than 39 litres of fuel. That's just over 8.5 UK gallons, and that's about the same as my pocket camper. Now, since the bike is fitted with Honda's 472cc engine as found in the CB500 range, I believe it's built under license in China, the bike will be pretty economical. Honda claim 80 mpg and a 300-mile range for their own S model. So assuming a slightly more reasonable 70 mpg, the Aventura should manage around 600 miles before it runs onto fumes. And it's said to be the longest range stock adventure touring bike ever produced by a manufacturer. It's probably the longest range bike ever. The question is why? How often does the average rider go 600 miles between filling stations? I mean, there's not many riders who will actually ride 600 miles in a day. It's all seems a little bit pointless to me. And there's also the likely effect on the handling too. Now, I remember riding the BMW F650 GS when that bike first came out. It wasn't a 650 single, you'll probably remember it was actually the 800 twin. And that particular machine also carried fuel in pannier tanks either side of the rider at the rear. Now, that particular bike, I noticed, had some slightly odd handling characteristics. It felt very much like the tail was wagging the dog as you rode it, and that was almost certainly the weight of all the fuel perched quite high up and quite rearwards on the bike. There's a good reason for carrying the fuel in the conventional petrol tank. It puts the mass in the middle of the machine where it has least effect on the bike's handling, particularly as the fuel level goes down. So, okay, what else have we got to talk about today? Well, Australian-based manufacturer Super Socco is already the best-selling e-bike brand in the UK, and Vmoto is their premium sister brand, and we're due to see their new bike in the UK early next year. And this is it. It is the Vmoto Stash. It's said to combine the agility of a scooter with the riding enjoyment, the stability and the braking distances of a conventional motorcycle. Now, as you have probably guessed, the name Stash references the fact that there is a storage pod under the tank, which is big enough it's claimed to hold a full-size crash helmet when you're off the bike, and of course you could stuff a holdall or a backpack in there when you're riding with the helmet on, so it becomes a quite practical sort of luggage carrying bike. I know people with the NC range love their little stash hole in under the fake tank on those bikes. Now, bike gets a small screen, as you can see. You get 17-inch wheels front and rear. You get twin brakes, which are CBS linked. I assume it will have ABS on it, although I can't say for sure at the moment because it didn't say that in the press release. The dual seat, I noticed, gets some big grab handles at the rear, which I'm always very pleased to see on a motorcycle. You know, I carry passenger a fair amount. There's nothing worse than losing your passenger off the back of a bike. Now, essential numbers. The motor has a nominal power of 8 kilowatts, so it's not going to rip off down the road. But it does seem to have been uprated from the 6 kilowatt motor of the prototype, which was doing the rounds of the bike shows last year. So, fairly significant power upgrade. The 8 kilowatt motor can also hit a peak of 15 kilowatts via a boost function, and that lifts the regular top speed of 110 kph, which is just under 70 miles per hour, to 120 kph, which is around 75. So, not a lot, but just a little bit extra. The 7.2 kilowatt hour batteries claimed to offer a maximum city range of 161 miles, 260 kilometers, though I would expect that to halve with open road riding at any kind of speed. With a fast charger, it takes 3.5 hours to top up the removable battery from a domestic 3-pin socket. Without the fast charger, it's basically 6 hours, so it's an overnight job. I'm not sure how you remove the battery though, since there appears to be no way in through the fairing, not obvious one anyway. And for those who do continue to believe the old myth that electric bikes are heavy, the stash tips the scales at just 105 kilograms, 230 pounds. Now, I know they will say, be those who say that it's still too short and not quick enough range and speed wise, but for many people I think it will make a pretty good case for itself. Actually, the reported price of £4,999, if that's correct, I suspect it will probably continue Super Socco's success in the sales charts. Right, a couple of items left before I knock it on the head for the day. Just one quick clarification. Now, apparently Suzuki GB said in interviews that were released before the Milan show went live that the SV650 and the DL650 are not being dropped from their range. Now, I did say that they were going to be dropped, and it's apparently all been made possible because the 2021 models were actually tweaked to meet the Euro 5 legislation. That was pretty much at the last moment. So therefore, and unlike the GSXR 1000, these bikes are not end of life on December the 31st, the date on which all bikes built to Euro 4 specifications must be withdrawn from sale. Now, all I can say to that is that ever since the new 800 twin Suzukis were first mentioned, there have been regular statements that these bikes were going to be seen as a replacement for the 650 V twin. But Suzuki have now stated that the older bikes will be running side by side with the new GSX 8S and the 800DL, and the new twins will now be positioned as the next bike up from the 650s, thus offering a choice for riders as they gain experience. That's what Suzuki say. Whether there's room for both the 650 and the 800s side by side, even in Suzuki's rather threadbare range, is a moot point, of course. There's only 10 horsepower between them, so there's not much of a jump for a more experienced rider to look forward to. The real difference will be the choice of a V twin or parallel twin. I suspect there will still be some people who want the V. The rumoured pricing could give an indication, though, that this is what Suzuki intends. The prices haven't yet been revealed, but the word is that the 8S could be as much as €10,000. That's around £877 at current rates. That would make it considerably more expensive, £1,800 to be precise, more expensive than the base model SV650, which is currently at $6,999 on Suzuki's website. Now, assuming that the 800DL carries a similar price premium over the existing DL650, that itself is already £1,000 more than the base model SV650. So that would put the bike well up the pricing charts. Now, interestingly, the first 4-cylinder and the next bike up the range is the 85 PS GSX S950, which is one of those 1000cc Suzukis, but this one is restricted to 85 PS, which means it can be legally restricted for the A1 motorcycle license. Now, the really bad news, I think, for Suzuki, though, if this pricing is correct, is that it will make the 8S an awful lot more expensive than the more powerful, equally brand new but much more keenly priced Hornet, which is already on sale on the Honda website for a bargain, £6,999. And it also makes the Suzuki considerably more expensive than the established but less powerful MT-07, which is 7,200 and basically just a little bit more expensive than the base SV model. And what it does do, this pricing, is push the Suzuki 8S firmly into BMW F900R territory. And frankly, I'd still see it difficult how Suzuki will manage both the 650 and the 800 in this model range, particularly if those rumoured prices are right. My guess is that the 650 will probably be phased out before the next hike of emission regs. We'll see. I mean, I'm speculating here, but we'll only know when the SV vanishes from Suzuki's website, I suppose. But there we go. My observations on that. Yeah, I know that Jeff, who watched this on catch up last time round, had quite a lot to say about the SV. So that's my thinking on the matter, and a clarification for everybody who listened in to the previous show. Now, over to today's discussion point. Just before I do that, I will take the opportunity to remind you once again, of course, of the Survival Skills webcast series and the fact that I will be covering the science of being seen. Once again, this is the presentation that looks at the origins of the "Sorry mate, I didn't see you" Smidsy crash, explains the visual perception problems that drivers experience whilst they're looking for bikes, tries to debunk the myth that drivers don't look for bikers, something I just come up on my local forum again and again and again. Drivers do look for bikers. They see nearly all of them, or we'd never get beyond the end of our own road, would we? Think about it, it's logic. It tries to explain why it is, though, that high vis and day riding lights have been less than effective at preventing this crash, and covers some proactive and simple strategies that we can take to avoid being taken out by anybody else. So that particular presentation is Wednesday, the 7th of December at 8 p.m. Do come along if you want to find out more about the science of these collisions. I'm more than happy to cover them for you online as many times as people want to do it. So Pearl Harbor Day, Wednesday, 7th of December, is the next of these shows. Right, okay, back to the final story of the day. It's today's discussion point. Now, as I usually do whilst preparing these shows, I do scan my news feeds to see what's going on in the motorcycle world. And according to the Scottish press, road safety campaigners have been raising concerns at what they call a rise in the number of deaths and injuries on Scottish roads, and particularly at the number of motorcycle deaths, which they claim have doubled. According to one headline, the road safety campaign Break has voiced fears about what they are describing as carnage. Now, what happened? Well, the press claims say that the numbers of motorcyclists killed and seriously injured soared between 2020 and 2021. And what they have done is they've looked at the latest figures for 2021, which of course have been recently released. And what they show is that the number of deaths amongst motorcyclists rose from 16 in 2020 to 30 in 2021, which is where they get the almost doubled figure from. The KSI total across Scotland, killed and seriously injured, that went up by 20% from 261 in 2020 to 312 in 2021. And they say it's particularly bad because, by contrast, the killed and seriously injured total for Great Britain as a whole rose by 16%. Now, they also point out that with a total of 1,760 people killed or seriously injured on Scotland's roads in 2021, that means around 1 in 5 of the casualties involved people riding motorcycles. The report in the Scottish paper also says that, quote, a separate Transport Scotland analysis shows that the highest rate of accidents occurred in the category of males between 17 and 25 age group, with 1.9 crashes per 1,000 population. This figure was 1.1 for females of the same age. Now, I looked at that and I really was very skeptical, because that would mean that the males were actually crashing and injuring themselves at the rate of 1 in 500. Now, I did the obvious thing. I went and looked for some data. And what I found was that for 2015 to 2019, the motorcyclist casualty rate was actually highest for the 23 to 25 age group, and it was 0.22 per thousand population. And that was followed by the 16 to 22-year-old age group, which was 0.2% per thousand population. Now, I can't find the original source for the paper's claim. They almost never publish the references for their figures, but my guess is that there is a displaced decimal point in the paper's data. I suspect the figures should have been 0.19 for the males and 0.11 for the females, and that would put it in line with the data from those 4 years, 2015 to 2019. Now, as I always say, when it comes to statistics, the context is vital. So how do the 2021 figures, for example, stack up with previous data? What about the 2019 figures, which of course we weren't provided with? Well, I went back a year and I looked. In 2019, there were 520 deaths and serious injuries involving motorcycles, and the 2019 total was actually down 19% on 2018. So, looked at in that context, the 312 is a significant improvement. Now, let's have a look at a graph. I went and dug out this information for you. This shows the longer term trend. If I can actually get the damn thing up on screen. Here we go. Have a look at that. Now, what you'll see is the green line here is for motorcycles. And over the period 2009 to 2019, it's been generally trending downwards, as have cars and pedestrians. It's cyclists actually who have been trending slightly upwards. So it's quite clear that by looking across the longer time frame and not just cherry picking the 2020 and 2021 figures, that there has been a steady decline on a longer time scale. And in fact, if you go back and you look over even longer time scales, you'll find that the accident rate has come down steadily since the end of the Second World War. So motorcycling has been getting steadily safer all the time. Now, why the upward blip then between 2020 and 2021? Well, it's not rocket science. It's not even brain surgery. Come to that. 2020 was, as I'm sure you all remember only too well, the year of lockdown with curtailed travel. So fewer miles traveled, fewer bikers on cars sharing the road, fewer crashes and collisions. Fairly straightforward. The higher figure is, of course, distressing. I'd like to see not a single rider killed or injured anywhere, but it's not indicating that there is carnage on the roads. It's not implying that somehow motorcycling has become suddenly a lot more dangerous. And it's entirely wrong of Brake or any other organisation to try to use these numbers to imply that motorcycle safety is getting worse. The long-term trend simply proves it isn't. And there's something else to consider as well. Brexit probably put quite a few riders off trying to travel to Europe. We heard a lot about the delays, the complications, the problems of getting across the channel, even without all the problems like of COVID passports and the rest of it. So it's very likely that the numbers of riders actually visiting Scotland increased significantly in summer 2021. As I recall, whilst we had a fairly average summer down here in the southeast, 2021 was a spectacular summer in northwest Scotland in particular. I seem to recall my friends up there never ceasing to tell me every time I spoke to them. So the only way to be certain, of course, would be to have the mileage data to hand so that you can actually look at crashes per kilometre. But of course, that's not part of the press story. Now, as it happens, Scotland has seen some pretty innovative safety initiatives over the years, including the dedicated Live Fast Die Old website, and one safety film that caught my eye a while ago, which is titled The Devil's Beef Tub. It's not a road I've actually visited, but one day I must actually get up there and have a look at it. But there's a YouTube video here. This is the short version. There's also a longer one. And basically, the video focuses on the dangers of riders in groups and the risks that are to be faced riding on Scottish roads, and it highlights the potential hazards, which include sheep, stationary cars, and the blind bends. Now, I've just got one slight criticism of the movie. I'm sure it's filmed with expert riders, and I suspect they were also trying to make the point that if you ride very close together up the backsides of your own buddy, you will be at risk. But you know, the problem is that some people won't read the sort of the message implicit in the bike spacing, and it is far too close for safety, far too close for comfort, and where they come around the blind bend and find a parked car, in fact one rider does have to swerve. Now I'm sure they were trying to make that point, but I would still have stretched out the intervals between the bikes for that video. But it does finish on a really good strap line. Be aware on breathtaking roads. Don't let them take your breath away for good. I quite like that one. Right, that's it for today. Don't forget, if you've got any comments, questions, drop me a line. I'll try to get back to you. That is pretty much it for today. The presentation, which the webcast on Science of Being Seen, is going out on Wednesday, the 7th of December, 8 p.m. Do try and pop over if you possibly can. The link for that is up in the preamble to the show. I'd love to see you over there. Tickets are available at £5, which won't break the bank, will it, really, if you're honest. So hopefully see some of you, and should be back with the next show on Sunday. But meanwhile, from me, Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, if you are out there on the bike enjoying what has turned into a beautiful sunny day, do stay shiny side up.